Hey there, it's Professor Streeter, and I'm going to do my best to talk you through the third quiz that you took last week. I think some of you struggled a little bit with it. That's okay, it was a hard quiz. I gave everybody an extra point because it was hard. But let's talk about the questions and the answers. And all right, let's get started. So the first question, and this is from Gilgamesh, who is being addressed in this speech. And this is from Tablet 6, when Gilgamesh and Enkidu are confronted by Ishtar. And these are Gilgamesh's words to Ishtar when she asks Gilgamesh to marry him. So the question, who is being addressed? Who is being spoken to? That is Ishtar. Okay. Second question. What does Utnapishtim say to his wife about human beings? This is in Tablet 11, after Utnapishtim has told the story of the flood to Gilgamesh, and Gilgamesh realizes that there's no secret to immortality, but he still wants something, and Utnapishtim isn't sure about whether to give him anything before sending him home. His wife wants to give him gifts, but Utnapishtim is worried, and he says that human beings are dishonest. And so he contrives a scheme to sort of test the honesty of Gilgamesh. This is the scheme about the loaves of bread. The test for Gilgamesh to see if he can have be immortal is whether he can stay awake, and of course he can't stay awake. But Utnapishtim is not convinced that he'll believe him when he tells him that he couldn't stay awake. So he has his wife bake these loaves of bread to make it look like he's been asleep for 7 days. But this is in Tablet 11, where Utnapishtim expresses this view about human beings generally. Sorry, let me get the text so that I can share specific passages. Okay, so that's in line. That's on page 79 of your text, but line in Tablet 11, around line 212. Men are dishonest. He will try to deceive you. It's interesting. I don't know why Utnapishtim believes this about people, but he does. He's sort of an old codger living at the edge of the world who's lost his faith in human beings. Okay, that's question 2. Question 3, how are the dead envisioned in Enkidu's dream? This is Tablet 7, where Enkidu dies, and he has a dream. And on page 50, and this is line 150 or so, he has all this description of what the dead are like. He dreams of going to the underworld, and he sees that they are clad in coats of feathers like birds. It's almost like they are bird people, but the feathers kind of attached to their body. Okay. Question 4. Well, the questions actually, they come in different order depending on when you take the quiz, so sorry about the numbers, but what do the gods do during the flood in Gilgamesh? And then again, this is the story that Utnapishtim tells in Tablet 11. And on page 75, right after the flood comes, they're terrified, right? And they go up high above the waters and curl up like dogs in the sky. This is a moment in the text where the gods are not represented by the poet with reverence. The gods are compared to dogs. It's an interesting moment in the poem. Many of you wrote about the idea that the attitude of reverence is there throughout the text, but this is a moment of irreverence, where the gods are no better than dogs at this moment. They've destroyed the world, and they act like dogs. It's an interesting moment. That's question 4. Question 5, what does Gilgamesh bring as a gift to Ishtar during Enkidu's funeral rites? And here I just wanted you to focus on Gilgamesh's mourning. You know, he in tablet 8, I mean, he really goes through a pretty extensive ritual mourning the death of his friend. And he gives all these gifts to the gods, right? I mean, Gilgamesh was deeply irreverent to Ishtar in rejecting her offer of marriage. But at this moment, right, he offers her this staff of polished, gleaming wood that he offers to her. And he offers many gifts to many of the gods. But this is tablet 8, right? And to Ishtar, he offers the staff. Okay. What I wanted you to notice there was just like how many gifts he gave, and all of the different gods that he offered gifts to. But he gives a gift to Ishtar. That's important. He kind of makes peace with Ishtar. Okay. How does the Epic of Gilgamesh end? This was a hard question. It does remind us of our mortality, I suppose, but that's not the very ending, right? I think that comes earlier in Tablet 11, where Sir Gilgamesh comes to terms with the fact that he's going to die. You might read it as a triumph of good over evil, but I think that's not clear. It's not clear that good is triumphing over evil in this story. It's maybe one way of reading it, but it's not clear. The king, again, maybe he transforms at the end. There is a kind of transformation, but not a complete transformation. At least there isn't evidence for that in the text. On some readings, Gilgamesh doesn't go through a great transformation. He realizes something, but he's still Gilgamesh. He's the same king he was at the beginning at some level. You could also read it as, that he's gone through a change, a substantial change, but he hasn't gone through a complete transformation into another kind of being or way of living. What it does, though, the poet returns us directly to the beginning. The lines of the poem at the very beginning of the poem are the same as the lines of poetry at the end, right? We return to the prologue, right? Not the very first line, but if you go back to the very beginning of the text, right, we have this reference to going and unearthing the stone at the bottom of the walls and reading the story. Well, this is the story that he's telling, and he's telling Urshanabi now to climb the walls, to examine the foundations, right? And this is the very language that the poet opens with in Tablet 1, right? So the poet returns us with his language to the beginning of the poem, right? The kind of circular structure of the poem. Okay, let me move a little more quickly. How is Noah first identified? He's identified in many ways, but the first reference we have to him is as the one who will console us for the pain of our hands' work from the soil. That's in chapter 5, before the story of Noah really begins. But he's sort of, the text sort of identifies him this way. Question 8, what does Gilgamesh see after passing through the mountain of Mashu? This is in Tablet 9. It's the first thing he sees are the trees of the gods made of exotic stones and gems. He's like, he glimpses almost like the garden of the gods. He gets to see that. That's a kind of an important moment. It's not a place for humans, but it's a place of beauty. It stills him. It makes him pause. Question 9, what is the covenant God establishes with Noah? There are different ways of, this is a hard question. I mean, he does set a rainbow in the clouds, but the covenant, the promise is never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood. These are the other answers are things that God does. He says those things, but the promise that God makes is never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood. The 10th question, what does Anu want to know before he hands Ishtar the tether to the nose ring of the bull of heaven? So this is when Ishtar goes to her father to ask for the bull of heaven to punish Gilgamesh with, or to destroy Gilgamesh with, because he's rejected her offer of marriage. And before he gives her the bull, he wants to know that the people will be protected, because there's a sense that the bull of heaven brings ruin to the people, or plague, or I think an earthquake or drought. It's unclear. Probably drought. I think the bowl of heaven probably represents earthquake and drought. So natural conditions that do harm to the people. So he wants to know that that the farmers have grown and stored 7 years worth of hay, because there's going to be a dearth of growing, right? The growing, it's going to be hard to grow. There's going to be a drought. That's what the bowl of heaven represents. And so he wants to make sure that the people are protected from the bull before he gives the bull to Ishtar. Eve correctly identifies God's command when she tells the serpent that God said not to eat from the tree of knowledge and not to touch it. That was a kind of a trick question. That's a false claim. Eve makes a mistake. God only said not to eat from the tree. He did not say not to touch it. And so when the serpent kind of confuses her a little bit, she convinces herself that God told her not to touch it. And so then she touches it and finds that she doesn't die, which is interesting, right? Then she eats it. But God did not tell her not to touch it. He just told her not to eat it. So she kind of remembers or incorrectly identifies what God actually said. That's interesting. The 12th question, what is the lasting image of Enkidu's death that haunts Gilgamesh? That's the moment where he's finally confronted by Shiduri and Utnapishtim, when they see him for what he is and they ask him to tell him his story, like, why is he running? And then he tells them why he's running and why he's so sad and why he looks so grieved. It's because he's lost Enkidu, and he ends the story, or toward the end of his answer to the question, like, what's going on with you? He gives them this image of the maggots crawling out of Enkidu's nostrils, right? And so that's kind of been haunting Gilgamesh. We see him reference that a couple times in Tablet 10, that image of death. Okay. Question 13, what's the first thing God says after commanding the human not to eat from the tree of knowledge? This is in chapter 2. He says, it's not good for the human to be alone. And it's at this moment that God makes the other animals. And so there's this first stage is the human lives with the other animals, and then that's not sufficient. So God makes Eve. But this is what comes directly after the command. Don't eat from the tree. And then it's not good to be alone. Here are the other animals. Interesting moment in the text. The last two questions. What does the God of Genesis do right after Noah offers the burnt offerings of cattle and fowl on the altar? So this is after the flood. Noah survives the flood. He makes an altar to the Lord. This is an important moment. We see this. Abraham also builds an altar to God. But he burns offerings. This was the custom. We see this in Greek mythology. I hope you've been seeing that. A lot of burning of offerings to the gods in Greek mythology. Noah does the same thing. And God, this is a God who doesn't eat the offerings. The Greek gods and the Mesopotamian gods eat the offerings that are given to them. We see Poseidon in the beginning of the Odyssey. He's down in Ethiopia feasting with the Ethiopians. The gods eat the food that we give them. The God of Genesis does not eat the offering, but he does smell it. Right? So this is a God that does, is in contact with the physical world, but doesn't eat what we give him. He smells it. Important difference. And finally, what is God's curse on Cain? Well, we know the mark of Cain, but this is what he puts on Cain to protect him from dying. Right? If anyone kills Cain, there will be sevenfold vengeance on Cain's murder. So that's the mark on Cain, so people don't murder him. And that's the cross he bears, I guess you could say. But the actual curse is that the soil will no longer give him strength, and he will be a restless wanderer. Right? Similar to Adam's curse in a way, but stronger. A stronger curse on Cain. It's kind of a renewal of the curse on Adam, but sort of even stronger, that he will wander restlessly, that he will be without a home, much like Odysseus. Okay, that's all for now. And I hope that was helpful. Okay, I'll see you soon. Bye.